Hello, everybody, and welcome to Taking Control, the ADHD podcast on rashpixel.fm. I'm Pete Wright, and that there is Nikki Kinzer.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Pete Wright.
Hello, Nikki. It's Q&A day. It's a grab bag of fantastic questions and hopefully some improvisational but sound answers to those questions as we dig into the show today. Before we do that, head over to takecontroladhd.com to get to know us a little bit better. You can listen to the show right there on the website or subscribe to the mailing list, and you'll get an email each time a new episode is released. You can connect with us on Twitter or Facebook at Take Control ADHD, and a special shout out to all of you who have committed to this show as supporters through patreon.com/the ADHD podcast. For as little as $1 a month, supporters get access to our Facebook live stream each week by way of our double secret Facebook private group just for those people, and they know that their ducats are supporting the continued long-term function and development of this show. Patreon.com/the ADHD podcast. Thank you so much. All right, Nikki, you got all these questions. Where do you want to start?
Let's just start with the first one that I wrote down, shall we?
I'd like it.
It's a good place to start, right? No rhyme or reason.
No.
Okay, so this gal had two different questions and wanted to know if this was common. Okay, so she has noticed that she's developed a little bit of a bias as she's learned more about ADHD and processed it, over the past couple of years. And what she's finding is that she really prefers to work with people who have ADHD. She loves her non-ADHDers in her life, but have a special place in her heart for those that have that special sauce of ADHD. So her first question is, do other people feel the same?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Hallelujah. Amen to that. Yes, absolutely. But, I don't think it's because they have ADHD, right? I really don't think it's just because I like working with people who have ADHD. It's because in general, speaking way too globally for anybody's good, but in general, I find that people who are aware of their ADHD tend to have a deeper awareness and they've internalized the kinds of tools that they need to be super productive and to collaborate well, and because they need all of these systems just like I do, and our systems usually work well together. And so I find it's just easier to work with people with ADHD because they already speak my language. They already understand why I need accountability and why I need reminders and why I need, everything documented just so. So it's just, so I don't know that it's necessarily that I smell ADHD on them. Somebody's chumming the water. I better get over there. But more that we have a common tongue, and that's really important.
Yes. And I think it's similar too to, you attract the people that are like you. You attract the people that, think like you. And one of the things that is hard, I think, for a lot of people, unless you are one of those people, is being around negative people. When you're a positive person, you're going to you're probably going to more attract that positive person in your life and be less attracted to the negative. And it's kind of the same thing. It's like you want to be around people who think like you, understand you, accept you, and all of that. So yes, I agree. I think it's very normal.
Well, and I think there's a real benefit to being aware of this, which is, if you want to attract those people, be very open about the kinds of tools and sort of lifestyle you live, because they'll smell the ADHD all over
as
you
well.
too. And you want to bring those people into your life. So that's important.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And just to add on to this real quick, I did have a question about a week ago, and she wanted to know, this is a different person, but it leads into this. She wanted to know the differences between sort of how an ADHDer thinks and a non-ADHDer thinks. And so we are going to do a show on that. And I don't know exactly how it's going to look, but I know Pete's going to interview me on a few things, so that we can kind of see where maybe some of those differences are. Not to compare to each other right or wrong. It's just to see what the differences are.
We will be comparing right
No,
or wrong.
we will not.
Yeah, somebody's going to win.
Not. No.
There will be a winner decided on this show.
No, we're not. People can still hear you, Pete, right? So anyway, I'm looking forward to that because I've been thinking a lot about it. So
excellent.
Okay.
Excellent. All right.
All right. So second
Next we
question.
have, was this a second question or is there another question around
This is-
technology here that's coming up?
Well, yeah, this was actually from the same person, but it is a technology question. So go
All right.
for it.
Well,
friend.
the question is, do you have any experience or advice with regards to noise canceling headphones? Seems like a decent solution for my office environment, but I'm not sure that spending the money up front is worth it if the solution may or may not work for me. This is actually a great question, and there's a difference between sound isolating headphones and noise canceling headphones. The headphones that I'm wearing, right, these over the ear, they're giant. They have this big puffy, cushion on the ear. These I find are really good for isolating sound from my head. But it's more muffled, right? And so these are not noise canceling. They don't have any technology in them that is actively putting sound in my head, the white noise in my head to counter the noise around me. And what, the best noise canceling headphones are doing, the Bose noise canceling headphones, for example, they actually have microphones on them. So they're listening to the sound outside and they're actually putting in a cancellation wave, a white noise wave that your music can get through, but the exterior sound cannot. So it's very, very smart, and they are very, very expensive generally. And so you really, that's a smart question. You don't want to do this unless you have, you're sure it's going to work. You can get cheaper headphones. You can spend $50-$60 and get some Sonys with noise canceling built in. They're not as smart, but it might give you an idea as to whether this will work for you. You can get a sense of whether or not this is going to be a solution that'll work for you. I also find that if wearing the giant over the ear cones isn't going to work for you, you can try something like an in-ear headphone. Etymotics, for example, makes a really great in-ear headphone. And if you want to go the extra mile, you can call an audiologist or a hearing testing agency, and you can actually have molds made of your ear. This is what musicians do, right? So you have molds made of your ear in your ear canal, and then those are manufactured into a little rubber gasket that goes on the end of your great in-ear headphones. And then you put them, they're made for each of your ears. So you put them in your ear. And what I find is because there is there's a hard seal between your ear and that's the shape of your ear and the outside world, it actually reduces a lot of noise without having to go the route of having the actual white noise pounded into your ear all the time. So, yeah, I really liked it. I had them for a long time and swore by them, especially for podcasting. That's why musicians use them. You see the guitarists, they have, those are their monitors, so they can hear what they're playing more clearly, or what they're singing more clearly over the sound of crowds and things like that. Because, clearly we're all our own inner rock stars. And you want to make sure that you have that taken care of. So that is one way to look at it. That's not a cheap route. And buying really nice Bose, noise canceling headphones, effectively is going to cancel it out. But if you don't want the technology of, noise canceling in your head all the time, this is kind of a fun way to be more discreet and have headphones that really lock in your brain. So,
and you can just describe it to people as I'm putting out my inner rock star.
I'm my inner rock star. Yeah,
I am.
That's what it is.
I'm expressing that.
Yeah.
Yes, I love that. Okay.
Yep.
All right. So next question is for me. I am considering getting an ADHD coach, but I live in South Africa, and it seems like there is not much awareness of ADHD in adults yet. I've done a basic search and no real joy. I'm not sure whether I should try going to and this is in quotes, normal executive coach, and rather just try and screen and educate them on ADHD. Okay, so this is where I'm on the fly a little bit because I don't have I haven't prepared notes here. So when I first read this, I thought, normal, that's kind of funny to me because really what is normal?
Yeah, no executive coach is normal. Everybody knows that.
Right. I mean, and there's no normal ADHD coach either, right? I mean, the coach is not... you have to find a coach that you work with, regardless if you think they're normal or not.
They should be only as normal as you are. How about that?
Exactly. Yeah. I would say, I think that you would be putting a lot of energy into the coaching relationship by trying to educate ADHD, to that coach if they don't know a lot about it. I don't know if it would be worth it. So I think that it would be worth interviewing some executive coaches and finding out what their experience has been with ADHD, how much they know about it, what their style is normally, and kind of get an idea of if it would be a good match or not. There's a lot of ADHD coaches that you do have access to too, because so many of us actually do Skype, we do FaceTime, we have these, great resources where you can call into a number and it doesn't matter where you live, and we can coach you. So I wouldn't exactly think that just because it's not necessarily prevalent in South Africa, you could still find a coach somewhere else too that is ADHD specific.
Yeah, once you let go of the fact that the assumption that you have to sit down and meet with somebody face to face,
right?
It's much easier to find somebody who can help you.
It's much easier, and I don't think that executive coaches. I mean, I just have to say this. I mean, I think they're great coaches out there but there are coaches out there that don't understand ADHD, and that's probably not going to be the best coach for you. So I do think it's just like organizing. If you're going to have a professional organizer, make sure you hire somebody that understands ADHD. You think differently, and you want that coach to work with you and not give you ideas or work with you in a way that you're like, what? That's never going to work for me.
Right.
What are you talking about?
Right.
So, yes.
Excellent.
There you go.
Next question it's a great question. Do you have any good strategies for coming down from overstimulation? I find that I particularly get overstimulated during long meetings with colleagues, and sometimes from driving in traffic. It's hard to try to figure out a strategy once you're in that space. So I need some suggestions to try when I do get there. Yes. Oh, look, you're holding up a book.
I'm holding
Focused
up a book.
Forward. Yes,
and
indeed.
It's called Focused Forward. And he answers your question beautifully. I mean, you want me to answer this right away?
Well, I think you should answer it right away, yeah.
Okay, tag on. Okay, so he is very much into mindfulness and into finding that safe, happy place in your mind that you can go to when you're going through an emotional ADHD storm. Absolutely recommend that you check that out. And what's so great about that is it doesn't matter what space you're in. No one knows what you're thinking. No one knows what's going on in your mind and how you're calming yourself down. So that is my suggestion. What's yours?
Well, I'm a big fan of mindfulness too. If you're not checking out the meditation or mindfulness apps that we've recommended on this show, you should definitely do that. Make sure you have one at hand to tune that to be able to sort of tune that station in your brain and sort of retune it to something soft and AM.
Yes.
For me, actually, of late, and I find this interesting. And maybe it's akin to prescribing a stimulant for ADHD, right? You know, that Adderall and Concerta, they're stimulant medications, right? And so that's what you already are overstimulated, so you prescribe a stimulant. I'm not a doctor or nurse on this stuff, so I'm not going to explain it. But what I've done for my brain is I stumbled onto this podcast of these four guys, these brothers and their dad, and they are playing a years-long Dungeons and Dragons game. And it's called The Adventure Zone. And when I am overstimulated, I'm not kidding, because this is a thing that I am absolutely furthest from participating in my day-to-day work life, right? So I'm working, I'm in meetings, I'm on shows, and I get myself overstimulated. What I need to do is take my brain and say, whoop, we're going to go over here for a little bit and simmer down this other part in the background. And so when I turn on these people playing ADHD or playing ADHD and dragons, playing Dungeons and Dragons together.
They might have ADHD. You never know.
Believe me. Believe me, there are some issues there, but there are four. Their father and these three adult men are playing this amazing years-long game of Dungeons and Dragons, and I turn on an episode and I absolutely am able to disconnect in about 15 minutes. I'm feeling myself, my blood pressure goes down, like my pulse goes down. I'm just feeling more comfortable in my skin again. So find something like that distracts you enough, that is furthest from where you are right now. And that's one thing that works for me.
I love that idea. Yeah. I am going to completely change the subject for a second, because when you talked about the medication, it brought up something that I watched this morning on the Today Show. There is a new documentary on Netflix. It airs today. It's from Mariah Shiver, and it's about Adderall and the epidemic between the abuse that they're finding in college students and young adults. Now, it's interesting because I watched the clip. I watched a few minutes on the Today Show, and what really bothered me, and I might actually send a little comment in to see if they'll do a follow-up, is they talk about the medication and how it's being abused. And it sounds like it's for people that, aren't using it for ADHD. They don't have ADHD. So I'm hoping that they will do a follow-up that will also explain why the medication is necessary for ADHD, because they're missing a very critical piece of this issue. And so I'm going to watch the documentary probably over the weekend. I'm totally going to watch it over the weekend and see what, I don't know what the angles are and everything. But anyway, I wanted to throw that out to the audience so that they can see it. And, I don't know. I mean, I'm not one to write a show and say, hey, you should do this. But this really sparked something to me. It's like you're missing half of the story here. So we'll see what happens.
It's a very important half.
It is, because it just makes it look like all these people are using it to abuse it, and they're forgetting about the people that need it,
Right.
And
whose
their
lives and livelihood depend on these medications.
Yeah. And they're comparing it to, more heavier drug use. And
I know that, they're controlled substances. And so a lot has changed in the years since we've been dealing with meds in our house and having to, make the right phone calls at the right time, coming from the doctor, going to the pharmacy. Things have changed for good. We want controlled substances to actually be, controlled. But there are certainly some challenges with that. So that'll be an interesting story to watch. All right.
Yes. Okay. Moving on. So there was a shout out from a listener who talked, and I don't have the email in front of me, but I know that he was a big advocate for Trello and Habit Bowl. Mm-hmm. And he really felt like these were good apps to use, and they worked with him or worked for him and his ADHD. I'm familiar with Trello. I'm not familiar with Habit Bowl. I don't know if you have any ideas or thoughts around these things.
Habit Bowl is, you remember we've talked about these habit streak apps, right? Streaks. And we've talked about these kinds of apps where you have something you want to learn to do, and it takes a long time to form habits. And so this is a little app that notifies you, and you can set your goals and that kind of a thing. Okay. Habit Bowl is a really beautifully refined version of that, and with lots of great features and wonderful interaction design, and it's a good looking, cool app. And so, I will shout out as well for that one. Not as vociferous a shout for Trello. I'm really glad that it's working for this listener. It doesn't work as well for me unless I'm collaborating with somebody else. But anyhow, two great apps.
Yeah.
Next question is, oh my goodness, it has to do with navigating ADHD in the marriage.
I know, and I'm going to let you sum this one up because you're so much better at that than me.
Summarizer in chief. He is an INTJ on the Myers-Briggs, and his wife is an ENFP. That's a fascinating polarization there. Both have ADHD, but given their personalities and individualities, it looks different for both, and we respond very differently. In my case, I love putting all my work into systems and scheduling time. Lists and schedules are comforting, and they give me a sense of confidence, peace, and direction. See, back to that other question, I'd want to hang out with this person right here. We have the same language. But his wife is directly opposite. His Trello boards and to-do lists and schedules absolutely stress her out. Totally relate to that, too. She loves living in the moment, taking life as it comes, being spontaneous. She enjoys chaos and the lack of structure because it leaves room for unanticipated possibilities and the excitement and freedom of making decisions in the moment. Schedules feel suffocating to her and restrictive. How do you know what you'll need or want to do at a given time before you get there, she says. They're both pretty good at accommodating one another, he says, but sometimes this can be a significant tension because they approach things so differently. For instance, and here's the nut, they're in the middle of remodeling their house. In this kind of situation, his inclination to make lists of all the renovations that they want to do, prioritize them, schedule them, put them in on the calendar. And until I do that, I feel stressed out by the nebulous tasks floating around in the air. But from her perspective, if she even thinks about making a list or a schedule, she starts to feel suffocated and boxed in. We love each other very much, but sometimes we drive each other crazy. Any tips or suggestions for how to navigate a relationship like this? Go, Nikki Kinzer, go.
Oh, gosh. Holy cow. Gosh, it's so hard because relationships are so tricky. And, I can only base my own opinion on my own relationship, right? And the differences that my husband and I have on how we do things. And it really comes to compromise. I mean, it just really comes to accepting that there's a way he does things and a way that I do things, and kind of coming into the middle. And sometimes sometimes we can reach that happy place, and sometimes one of us is more irritated. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, it's really hard.
There's a need for buckets in my view. You need a bucket, and in these buckets go the elements of your lifestyle or of your life that are going to be effectively owned by one or the other of you, right? And so you're talking about a remodeling project. There is no rational way I could approach a remodeling project and see it actually get done without having schedules tied to it, right? You have to have schedules tied to it. And for that seems very clearly to fit into his bucket. He needs to own that. And the result of him taking ownership of that is it's going to put pressure and stress on her. And we have to acknowledge that it's going to be hard for her to let go of that and to see schedules that are clearly going to stress her out. But what is he going to give up in their life to be less scheduled, less structured, that are going to go into her bucket? The things that, like you just have to be able to define these buckets and take on that role. I mean, for us, the buckets are, much more clearly around money. My wife handles a lot more of the financial stuff. They used to be in my bucket years and years ago. It's not in my bucket anymore. My brain just doesn't handle it the way hers does. So it's in her bucket, and money still stresses me out. It puts pressure on me. It pushes me against a wall, because it's not my comfort zone. But there are things that I have in my bucket as well that stress her out, that push her. And that compromise has come, the compromise has become sort of comforting because we both know that it's pretty even. The things that stress her out, I'm understanding of that. I'm telling her, I know this makes it hard for you. Thank you. And the money stuff, I know this stresses you out. I know you don't like thinking about this. We have some bills due. Where do you stand on your client billings for the month? And she has accommodated me by being more gentle when she talks about money for me. So that's the kind of compromise that at least has worked for us. It's just, you have to take ownership of certain things. How could you possibly attempt any sort of construction gig without putting there are just way too many people involved, too many people who have to come into your, you have to make decisions. And they're all on a schedule.
Be a final. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely.
That is what I found. Like even in terms of, when I'm not at my best and scheduling is just out the window, the rest of the world works in schedules. It's just the way it is. And that's one of the accommodations you have to come to terms with. So
there you go. I mean, it's not a black and white answer. So I think we did what we could.
Yeah.
Without being marriage counselors.
It's a really hard one. Yeah. Without
right?
being marriage counselors. Yeah. Truly.
Yeah.
So, okay. There you go. Next question. How can you remind yourself of reminders? Like you need to set your alarm to go to lunch, but you forgot to set your alarm.
So I have a little story about this. It was perfect timing. This came in just this week, and I just was talking to a client about checking her calendar and reminding her to check her calendar. And so what we found in this conversation is reminders weren't helping her. Alarms were not helping her because the alarm would come off or would go off, and if she was in the middle of something, she'd turn it off. And so, and then the alarm goes, the notification at that point goes away, right? Like it doesn't come back unless you have it as a reoccurring thing. So alarms for her weren't working, but I still wanted her to try to get into the habit of checking her calendar. She still wanted to get in this habit. So this is what we came up with. Every morning she goes and gets a cup of coffee. So on her coffee maker right now, there's a little sticky note that says calendar. And that's her reminder to go check her calendar. So it's not an
That's
alarm.
great.
It's not,
Yeah.
and it's going to stay there until it's a habit, which, who knows, that it could stay there. It could be a permanent fixture as part of her coffee maker if she wants it to be. But that's what we did. So that's what I would encourage her to do is, what's the pre-step before the alarm? Because if you're not remembering the alarm, then what's going to remember you or remind you to do that? So,
Yeah, right.
Any other
That's
thoughts?
huge. Well, of course, for me, it's always going to be a digital solution, and it probably shouldn't be
Yes.
in most cases. But in this case, I actually have set the apps that are most important to me to remind me to do things. I've set them to open when I start my computer. So like my Todoist is the first app that launches after my computer's been shut down. So it's the first thing I see. And that is the same
So
thing
you
I
have
think
it,
that you're
yeah.
talking about, right?
Right. There's a
You put the
visual.
reminder as the first thing you see wherever you're going to be. And I'm already working on my computer during the day, so it's the first thing I see. And so whether it's a Post-it note on the coffee maker or something written on a whiteboard in the shower, right? I mean, that's another one. That's where you're going to be, like calendar. When you're in the shower, as you're there, you're thinking about it. So I think that's great. Put the reminder where you're going to be.
Absolutely.
All right.
Okay. So last question. And this actually was a question that was in our Patreon group, but I wanted to share it with the world because the last time you and I talked about hyperfocus was in 2014.
That's a long time ago, Nikki Kinzer.
It was a long time. And it was funny because the question is there a way to stop the hyperfocus? Her bosses are getting a little mad at her about it. And I remember we did a show on hyperfocus. So I went back into our archives and I put the link into our Facebook page and said, listen to this and then let me know if you have any questions. And she did. And she's going to try the alarm strategy, which I remember is that strategy of setting those alarms. If you're going into something that's more hyper-focus mode, like you think you're going to get into hyper-focus, having those reminders, those little alarms, they're going to pop in and say, okay, you have 15 minutes, you have 10 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever.
Yeah.
But I thought it was still worth us kind of just having another conversation about hyper-focus because 3 years is over 3 years is a long time for us not to talk about it.
Yeah, and it's still the same challenge, right?
Yes.
I mean, the challenge itself hasn't changed, and for me, I've grown less in favor of looking at hyperfocus as a superpower over the years. It can be, it really can be, but maybe it's as I get older, just 3 years older, it becomes more of a challenge to shake myself out of it. When I get into it, I would say, on the other hand, as I get older, it's much harder for me to fall into it. I'm struggling with hyperfocus less than I have been, but when I fall into it, it's harder for me to get out. Like it can go for days with little sleep, wake up thinking about the same thing, invasive thoughts, can't get out of it. But maybe because of all the other accommodations in my life that's that I have around the diligence of work when I'm going to do the work, alarms and things. Maybe I'm sort of softening the blow of hyperfocus, but that's not to say. So I guess that's to say maybe there's hope. There's hope.
Well, there's something about what you just said. I think there's something about what you just said is that you have put these. You're very. Your calendar is very structured in the sense that you really do have a sense of when you're going to work on certain things. So I'm wondering if there's something there that she could attach to and learn from you, is that maybe that is a way to kind of deal with that hyper focus when you're at work, is that, these are the boundaries. These are the set times that you are going to work on this, because there is a consequence here. There is a cost that she's feeling. And that is that her bosses aren't very happy with her getting into hyper focus.
Yeah. Part of it, for me, again, the sort of tools that go into my scheduling are are you breaking down each task into into its smallest component parts? If you're doing that, then you sort of limit the risk of falling into hyperfocus, because part of what happens with hyperfocus is you have this giant task, and once you dive into it, you see no framework, right? You see no divider of the work. You just start plowing through it and do it all and do it until you're done, because that's just where the invasive thought is. And for me, if I take this massive task before I actually start the work, before I feel the pressure of hyperfocus, and I break it into, maybe it's I need to do 10 of these things for the next half hour and then schedule another 10 of them the next day, that keeps me from falling into the trap of hyperfocus, because I'll always schedule something after that. I'll schedule a meeting with somebody, I'll schedule a call, I'll schedule something, another layer of task to help me move to something else, right?
Very thoughtful.
And that's a really important part. And if you have the task broken down enough, then you can put all those tasks on your calendar in your work box, and then you can move on to the things that come appropriately next, without stressing yourself out so much.
I like that.
You like that?
I do.
Well, I hope it helps. That's certainly something to try, and we can talk about that again later. But it's one of those things that really helps me. And when I open up Todoist in the morning and I see my schedule laid out with all my tasks with their agenda sort of built in, boy, there's a lot of comfort that comes in that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That was it. That's it. That's all the questions that came in. Thank you, everybody, for writing in all those fantastic questions. And thank you, live stream viewers, for putting up with our the whole show. We'll call it the whole show, trademark.
That's right.
Taking control of the whole ADHD podcast.
The good, bad, and not ugly.
The good, bad, and the coughing.
A lot of editing.
That's right. Some good editing today, but thank you all. We really appreciate you doing this. And obviously, I'm coming in here like just death warmed over, but it's because I just love this whole thing. Like, I love this whole experience. This is really, really fun doing this.
And people don't know you have 102 fever right now.
I do.
And so I'm looking at Pete Wright, and there's this like glaze in his eyes. It is kind of a
glow.
So I have to say,
focus.
You did a fantastic job today for having the flu, cold, whatever it is that you're dealing with. 102 fever. Your wife is sick. You're sick. Your son is sick. Thank you so much for being here, Pete.
Well,
you
thank
certainly
you.
did not need to show up, and you did. So I really appreciate
It's important to me. So thank you. I appreciate it. And thanks to everybody for putting up with me and for tuning in and downloading. We appreciate your time and your attention. On behalf of Nikki Kinzer, I'm Pete Wright. We'll catch you next time right here on Taking Control, the ADHD podcast.